Welcome to MJ Hobby Corner, everyone. Today, in this video, I want to discuss Combat HQ by Jim Bambra. This is a World War II rule set. Let's go take a look at it. I hope everyone's doing well today. What I want to do in this video is show examples and go over the rules for Combat HQ. This is a game that someone had messaged me and asked if I could do some kind of video on it, some kind of content on it. Now, for today's video, what I'm doing is I'm using the Armour expansion rules, which are basically their own game, but you can use it with the main rules, the core rules. So I do suggest that you get the core rules first, and I do have that book, and we will be going over that book as well. That book will introduce infantry, artillery, and all these other things, aircraft, so it will make the game a lot more interesting. But for today, we're going to look at just armor. And this is a part of, historically, I'm very interested in armor and armor battles. So, yeah, I do have a completely scratch build board, as you'll see in a minute. And all my units, my tank units for now, are also scratch built. These are my top downs. If you just coming across the channel and you're interested in how I made these, you can find them in Scratch Builder Monthly, my little magazine for scratch building, or even in my Patreon. Okay, I'm going to have a couple of videos later on how I make these vehicles and many others top down. So let's get to it. Let's start with the rules for Combat HQ. Okay, so what are some of the things we need to play? I made all this stuff handmade, but of course you can use whatever markers you want to represent different effects in the game. So the first one is disruption markers. Disruption markers, I'm using these small red dice, and they will depict disruption points. If you get 3 or more disruption points, the vehicle is out of the game. So that should be, a 6-sided dice should be more than enough to keep track of disruption points, and they can be put on the side of a vehicle. Next, we have suppression markers. Now, for me, I'm just doing these are little bits of foam, and I just write SUP or SUPP, or even the whole word suppression. But basically, it's just a little marker to help you keep track of suppression. When units are suppressed, they act differently in combat. Fire markers, and these are little markers that I made with the little bingo chips on the bottom to give them a little weight. And these basically, I put these in front of the vehicle, and it shows when a vehicle fired. And that's important in the game as well, so you know which of your vehicles fired on which part of the turn. The next one is staff order markers. A staff order is important to call in artillery and for other reasons. So for now, I'm using these old bingo chips, and I placed a plastic over it, and I can use washable markers to write on it. So this could actually take the place of some of the other markers just by writing the condition. But I'm using it as staff orders. You will need these 6s. Maybe not as much as I'm using here, but you will definitely need a handful of these 6s. Then we have artillery impact markers. Now, I made these out of clay. They're very simple, and I used some colored clay. Now, I'm going to make them a little better, add a little bit of flocking powder and all that stuff. But these are little impact craters, and it tells you where the artillery shells have landed. And then I have like a couple of random markers. There's some like explosion that I use sometimes. Sometimes I'll keep the unit on the table, but put a fire on it so that it represents a destroyed unit. So, but that's it. And smoke markers, last but not least. You do have smoke screens in this game. So again, I use the bigger wall of cotton, and sometimes I'll put them together and make a nice wall of smoke. And that is important in the game as well, smoke screens. Also important is a deviation dice. This is a special dice that tells you whether artillery fire hits or deviates. And this is only for artillery if playing with artillery. We will eventually, so eventually we'll need a deviation dice. But if you don't have a deviation dice, you can use two dice of two different colors, nominating one for the hit dice and the other one the deviation dice. So if this Sherman tank here is under artillery fire, we're going to say here is an impact crater. Going to roll the two dice. Black dice is the hit dice. So my black dice, if it rolls a 1 through 4, it means the hit deviates, and it deviates 4 inches. Also, we have to check the angle of the hit dice according to the red dice here. So since the red dice landed here, this point of the dice is the direction of deviation. So basically we would take our ruler and the hit would deviate 4 inches this way. Okay, now say my red dice was here. Well, then it would deviate 4 inches down this way, approximate, trying to be as accurate as possible. So it would be at an angle. If the red dice had landed here, well, let's roll it and just give the example. Okay, now the red dice is 5 inches. It still deviates because I haven't rolled a 5. Only a 5 or a 6 will be directly on top of the tank. So now it deviates 5 inches that way because the red dice landed there. So we would simply deviate it here and the blast hits somewhere in the woods. Okay, so that's basically it. More on this later. It's a cool little trick. It's a little bit harder than just having the deviation dice, which you just roll, right? Well, you have to roll it with another dice. So yeah, there the arrow points this way, so it's 6 inches deviation this way. And if it goes there, then you ignore this and you say, okay, it hit right on target. But I think this is actually a neat little trick. If you don't have that, you just have to pay attention, nominate one of your colors as the hit dice, and then deviation. And if it doesn't hit, any number from 1 through 4 is not a hit, meaning it deviates. You just check the direction of the red dice, where it landed. And that's your deviation and the number of inches that it deviates that way. So interesting. Now, if I roll a 5, we ignore the red, and a 5 or a 6 means direct hit. So we would be putting that blast right on the tank, and tank would explode or take hits, be suppressed, whatever the case is, depending on the kind of artillery and how powerful it is. All right, so we've covered all of the basic materials, and of course you need terrain, and I'm using my handmade terrain, top-down terrain, and top-down units, which are those vehicles over there. There's the allies. Okay, so yeah, you will need, of course, terrain or whatever you're using, miniatures or whatever you're using to represent your units, and that covers that. So now let's look at the stats of a vehicle. Let's take a Stug 3 as an example. So the type is the first stat you come across, and this just simply says what kind of vehicle this is. And this is a medium armored fighting vehicle, or medium AFV. The move is average. Now, movement in this game is specified, represented by a number, which is called the standard movement, and followed by a dice roll. So a dice roll and a bonus. So for example, average movement in this case means 6 plus 1d. That is how it is expressed. So that means the number 6 plus 1 and then a random die roll. So the result is, in other words, anywhere from 7 inches to 12 inches of movement for that vehicle. Now, it is important to discriminate between standard movement and variable movement, which is what the D represents, basically a D6 roll. So it's important to distinguish because some combat effects will take away your standard movement, the 6 in this case, and only allow you to use the variable movement, okay, plus the bonus in some cases. So AT is also a dice range, and not a range actually, it's a number of dice. AT is short for anti-tank fire and shows the number of dice rolled when firing at other armored vehicles. All the targets considered in this game are obviously armored. So it's just basically, in the case of the Stug 3, the AT for the Stug is 8 or 8D, meaning it will fire using 8 dice when it fires at other vehicles. And now range. There are 3 range blocks in Combat HQ. This is short range, effective range, and long range. So you will usually get 3 numbers after separated by slashes. So the range for Stug, for example, is 8 inches, 16 inches, and 32 inches. And the long range, at short range, fire is more accurate, and the units receive a -1 target number modifier. In this case, the -1 is not a penalty. It is a bonus because it reduces the number that you need to hit the opponent with. And then when we get to the medium range, it is unmodified. So the effective range has no modifiers. It is what it is. And that long range, units fire with a +1 target number penalty. So again, it's a penalty because it's raising the target number that you need to hit the other unit with. Okay, so that is at very long ranges. And that covers most of the major stats. There are also some special abilities, like the Stug has the 180-degree fire, which is more of a trait than an ability, meaning it can only shoot in its front arc. It has the special ability Ambush, and the low profile ability, which, because it has a low profile, it's a little harder to hit. And so that's why the reaction dice, the first number is a 7, because low profile gives it a +1 to that. So normally it would be a 6, but because of the low profile, it is a 7. Also important, and I forgot to mention for reaction dice, is that the number, it is expressed as 2 numbers and a letter, the letter D. So the first number is 7D, which means it has 7 reaction dice normally, and that's including its low profile. The number in parentheses, the 6D, is the reaction dice it takes during artillery strikes. So when you see that second stat under RD, it means that number in parentheses is its reaction dice when it is under artillery fire. Command orders are probably the most important part of the game. So command orders and command dice. Also, command groups. Now, Combat HQ places you in the role of a battle group commander, and how you effectively communicate your orders is handled by rolling these command dice. Command dice are given to you at the beginning of a mission briefing for each scenario. It'll tell you how many command dice each command group will have. Now, the command group is very interesting in Combat HQ. This is something that varies from turn to turn. It is very flexible. You basically nominate a vehicle, say this M18 Hellcat, and any up to 3 vehicles 6 inches from it, in the case of these Shermans, and then use your orders generated to activate them. Okay. However, you're not necessarily restricted to just activate the command group. You can give orders to other nearby command groups that may need, say, rallying or a fire order or anything like that. It's a very flexible system that is rather interesting, and it does allow you, depending on how well you roll, to actually be able to do a lot of things with your units. Important thing is order chains, and let's just roll the dice. We're saying that this command group is going to have 4 dice. And okay, so we have any number that is rolled together, numbers that are the same are grouped together. That is one order chain of 2 orders. One order chain of 2 orders. And then here is a 6 and a 2. So these are separate single order chains. And you can have up 3 up to 4, however many chains are formed this way, depending how many dice you have. Now the 6, the player that, because you are rolling these simultaneously, these are opposing rolls. Each player is rolling them simultaneously, and you're comparing them. The player with the most 6s is the one that goes first. So let's say if the German player rolling these red dice, here the German player rolled a 6, a 5, a 4, and a 3. These are all individual order chains. Each of these individual dice is a separate order that can go to a unit, to a separate unit. In this case, so I can use this 2 order chain. This is supposed to be the same number. Just make sure it's the same number, either a 4 or a 5. So this order chain, I can give it to this command group. And with that means 2 different things that I can do, 2 orders. So they can maybe move forward, or they can move double move, or they can fire and then move, or move and then fire. There's pretty much, you can do any variety of different things. You can rally, whatever it is that command group needs to accomplish its job. Or I could decide to give this command group, because I will have others. Here's another command group. We'll just say those Shermans are another command group. So we can just give these guys 1 order and give this to our command group over here and get them to move and clear that area, catch up a little bit. And then these guys can maybe get a fire order if they have targets that they can shoot at. This concept of order chains is very important in the game. So here with the German side, we see that it has a lot of individual orders, so they will probably be able to separate their orders into separate things for vehicles to do, such as movement, firing, whatever. So that's an example of one order. Now we notice that both players here rolled a 6. So when that happens, we have to go to the next number. So how many players have the most 5s? And in this case, the German player has the 5, and the Allied player does not. So in this case, because the 2 6s are the same, the German player actually goes first. And that's also how you determine initiative. And so the units alternate in terms of what they can do. So they will do something, then I will be able to do something, and then they do something, etc., etc. But they will be moving and activating a unit first because of the way the order chain works. Let me just rectify something real quick. With the ones situation, you are comparing it to your opponent's rolls. They have a 6. Let's just make this a 3. They have a 6, and I have 1. So this unmatched 1, because there is a 6 involved in the other player's roll, this 1 is discarded. Okay. Now, say I rolled a 1 and the opponent does not roll a 6. Let's just give him another order chain of 4. Let's say he has a 3 order chain. Why not? And that's it. Okay, so now there's no 6 here. So basically the opponent gets to use that dice as a wild dice this turn. Okay, so all of these ones are command failures, so a temporary breakdown of orders that are issued. So with command, we really want to, in the next video, talk more about order chains and orders, because issuing orders, because again, this is really the most important part of this game. When you roll 6s, for example, 6s are what's called a wild dice. They can be used attached to order chains to make them larger, therefore giving you more activations for that particular command group that you're activating. And they can be used in a variety of ways. So we'll go over wild dice and what that means. It's like a temporary improvement of the orders, of the order chain. So it's an opportunity for the battle group commander to really influence the battle. And that's what is represented by wild dice. Also, if you roll 1s and they are unmatched, because you are comparing command rolls with your opponent, you're seeing whether or not they have 1s and you have 1s. If they rolled a 1 and you rolled 1s, then those dice are discarded. But if they rolled a 6 and you rolled a 1, then they take that 1 and can use it for themselves as a wild dice. So that's a very interesting part of this game, and if you can like wrap your mind around that part, it's a very interesting component because it really simulates the importance of orders and order chains to really get the battle group going. Okay, and of course these order chains get translated into activations, into things that your unit can do, and it is battle group by, or command group rather, command group by command group. Also important is that in this game, one vehicle is called a platoon. So that's very important. When we say one vehicle or one platoon, it means one vehicle. That's just what the game designates that to be. And then a command group is a series of vehicles up to 4 with one leader. Okay, so that is 1 leader and 3 other vehicles, a total of 4. So it's an interesting game. It's a little more complex than what I've played, but sometimes I do enjoy something a little bit more complex, more in depth. And I'm sure that once you really start playing and all these things come together, it'll make a lot more sense and things will go a lot faster. So at first I'll probably fumble a little bit, but once I get used to it, it's going to be it is a very interesting rule set. So in the next video, we'll talk more about command and orders and activating units, and then we'll do combat as well. And eventually we want to do a basic game and start to unite all of those components and see how it works in the game, the turn structure and all that. So thank you very much. I will try and have the videos consistent and where they're not too long apart, because I know that would be annoying if they're too long apart. You know, if I do one now, 6 months later I do another one, it's not going to have the same kind of thing. So I will try and have them as close as possible to each other as I can. And it'll be 2 or 3 videos. We'll go over, it'll be a mini series. We'll go over all of the rules and then play the game, and little by little add more stuff like artillery and aircraft and all that other good stuff. And that'll be it. So I hope that you enjoy this video, and it does seem like a very interesting game. And I will be making more units, more top downs as well. I'll be making infantry and other stuff. So be on the lookout on either Patreon or MJ Scratch Builder Monthly on Wargames Vault. Patrons of my second tier get Scratch Builder Monthly as part of Patreon. So, all right, folks. Well, thank you very much. And that was a little bit of Combat HQ. We're beginning to touch the surface, and we're going to be exploring this game and looking at the turn structure and some combat, and hopefully get some games in and see how it all comes together. Thank you very much. This is Combat HQ by Jim Bambra. We'll talk very soon, folks.